Having heard his reductive approach to coexistence, what is Mr. Murray's take on multiculturalism?
You know, the interesting thing about multiculturalism, which of course itself has different definitions, let's say multiracialism, is that it's a unicultural phenomenon. And the way in which a lot of the politicians who've pushed this the most talk about it, you would think the whole world is going this way. And it isn't. Personally, I think that people have the right to and should not be attacked for wanting to belong, wanting to have a home, wanting to have a place that they call home, and a community, and so on. And we don't doubt or question the desire of people to do that if they are from all sorts of backgrounds. But if they are white and British, for instance, let alone white, British and working class, that would be a racist desire.
Roger Scruton said in an essay recently, the peoples of Europe are losing their place in the world. Interesting. I said this to an American friend recently who said I'd do that slightly differently. He said I'd say that the ideas of Europe are losing their place in the world. The thing is, of course, one will follow the other. And it's the loss of the ideas behind Europe that I am concerned about more. The idea of Europe is lost because it's not argued for. And as I say, in that situation, the best you can say to any incomer is, do what you want. Who are we to call? Who are we to make any judgment? So, I mean, the question is not what the colour is of most people in London or in Britain in 70, 80 or 100 years' time, but whether they're British in a recognisable way, whether they are the children of Europe, European Enlightenment and Judeo-Christian culture, whether they have the inheritance of thousands of years of thought, philosophy, and so on, or whether that's just, as they say, that's just history. And underneath all of the debates about immigration, the biggest questions of all exist. And that's why people are so exercised by them, is that it raises the most important issues of identity.
I still found it hard to get him to pin down what it means to be British. There isn't really any one definition or trait. According to another prominent commentator I spoke to, the only unifying feature would be the English language, but even that isn't there for everyone.
Just as an aside, I would say that one of the things that's most worth reflecting on, I think, in the immigration debate is that modernity and obviously globalization have brought huge benefits, and not least to the poor, which are very often ignored. And people still talk about poverty levels in the UK, but I mean, the issue of identity has been forgotten about largely, I think, by elites during this period, who are, I mean, it's like a bit of a cliche, but who are sort of happy as citizens of the world, sort of intelligent, educated, Obama-like figures, are, I think, happy with their cosmopolitanism. And I hope it doesn't sound patronising to say this, but I feel that may be an elite feeling, a sort of highly educated elite feeling. But it's not going to be one that sticks for everyone. And whilst all of these things are thought to be settled by a lot of people in positions of power, for a lot of people who are not in positions of power, I think that the question of who they are becomes more and more pertinent. This is why, I mean, at the end of the 20th century, most people were, you know, in a society like this, were, for instance, resigning to the idea that religion was sort of something which was going to, you know, trickle away, and that our lifetimes would see the march of progress and reason, and that religion would be so last century. I mean, who knew that the first decade of the 21st century would be entirely taken up with religious debate and challenge and rises in conversions and to different faiths and so on. And if you look at why it is that people need to belong. And I think there's something very obvious in that. And I think mass immigration, because it's gone on for so long, has so fundamentally changed the country that actually the sense of British identity is exceedingly weak, precariously weak now.
Is British competitiveness likely to suffer as a result of the cap?
I think the answer is no. I cannot see how this affects competitiveness. Companies who need to bring in people with expertise that literally nobody in the country has will be able to do it with a cap. But again, it's one of those bits of the debate that requires honesty, as the whole thing does. But I mean, for instance, what is a skilled worker? The last time we had this debate, it turned out that skilled workers included restaurant workers. I mean, I'm sorry, but I really don't think that the ability to make a nice dish makes you a skilled worker, or it's something that nobody in Britain could possibly be trained to do. It's absurd. It's absurd. And so, no, of course it doesn't make us any less competitive. There will be people who will complain about that, and they will do so for exceedingly base and obvious personal interest reasons. On the issue of nurses and other things, I mean, I have a big problem with this one, because I think there is something fundamentally immoral about hoovering up nurses from around the world and bringing them here. I think it's just an appalling thing to do. I think it's an appalling thing to do, to have a country that may well be very poor training their own people up to a level of education only for them to be useful to their country, and then to be hoovered up by Britain to serve the gargantuan and wasteful monolith of the NHS. And I mean, the whole thing of course, visa, work permits effectively are not, effectively are just granted residency for the rest of your life, and so on. I mean, it's such a lax system that it's just laziness. I mean, a profound laziness on the part of people who are meant to do their jobs. The way in which immigration works, the way in which they talk about it, I mean, it's so baffling. Like the idea that as the population gets older, you need more nurses, things, which means you import people who then themselves do, I hate to break it, get old themselves. It's a very strange thing in this country. It's almost as if people don't believe that immigrants also can get old. Only British people age.
I asked Mr. Murray what he thought of the European Convention on Human Rights and its implementation in relation to the British judicial system.
My own feeling on the convention is that we've only got two options really in Britain, which is either we do what France and Italy do and ignore it at times. And I wrote in one of the Dutch papers recently, and I mean, just be at a point where, because Holland should do this as well, you just say, you and whose army? Laws are only laws if they're enforceable. These are not enforceable. It's very strange British literalism around this, by the way. I mean, as I say, it's the Italians and French do it all the time. There's a ruling, and the British seem utterly unwilling. It's some kind of residual sense of playing by the rules or something. Even if somebody gives you a totally new rule book, you still play by it. I think the only two options are either we disobey it from time to time, or we get out and do what Cameron said he'd do before the election and have a British Bill of Rights, which is what I personally would favour. I mean, I think these things do huge damage to genuine asylum cases, and I think the system is doing genuine damage to the real humanitarian needs that exist. I mean, by the way, most of this, we haven't been talking about asylum so far, but I mean, among the knock-on effects of mass immigration and the idea that immigration is an economic issue is the fact that genuine asylum is and has, and certainly will do more in the future, suffered for this thing. I mean, it is in the public mind, although some polling does suggest that that there isn't more nuance than one might expect, but in the public mind I think these things are all now tied up with each other, and I think that's a disaster. People who came here to flee the genocide in the Balkans in the 90s, for instance, are not the same as people who came here for work, and their need is greater. There are details around the edges of the asylum question which obviously I can disagree with, but the fact that the country should provide something like this is, I think, indisputable. But the way in which they go about it currently, I mean, just does such huge disfavours to the whole cause. Basically now you can't deport anyone anywhere, of course. There are lawyers who have made cases in terrorism expedition trials
that people cannot, like Abu Hamza cannot be sent to America because he could be sent to Guantanamo, possibly tortured and so on. The granting of asylum to people, if they are, could be the subject of persecution in their own countries. There's such an interesting one on the, for instance, lesbian, gay rights, because as I understand it, we are obliged to give asylum to people who could be persecuted for their sexuality in their country, which means even on that thing alone, on that issue alone, Britain could be the subject of millions and millions of asylum applications from across every single African country, the whole of the Middle East, much of the Far East, and elsewhere. I mean, and I sort of don't, as I say, I mean, it's just a troubling question because no one seems, it's just one of the bits that nobody seems to have sort of worked out. How can you provide this asylum? And as well as, there's another discussion, but I mean, the root of this comes all of the big questions of our time. I mean, are these rights actually universal, or do we just hope they are? You know, can we make them universal? Do we enforce them? The questions to which the answer is not easy.
That was Douglas Murray, Director of the Centre for Social Cohesion in London. And this has been About Face. Thank you for listening.